And here's what's coming up on the world today. Canada is on track to face its worst ever year of wildfire destruction. Torrential Haiti has left at least 42 people dead. Plus, Prince Harry arrived at London's High Court. Canada is on track to face its worst ever year of wildfire destruction. The country has been battling what experts believe is the most severe wildfire season on record there. About 8.2 million acres of land had been already burned, and that's about 13 times more than the average over the last decade. Canada's Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau, this year's fires has said that have destroyed many homes, impacted oil and gas production, and polluted the air, even beyond the border, all the way to the United States. Currently, there are more than 400 active wildfires in Canada, and more than half of them are deemed out of control. Tens of thousands of people are under evacuation across the entire country.
Especially severe wildfire season throughout the summer. We're going to get through this together, and our government will keep being there with whatever it takes to keep people safe and provide support. Year after year, with climate change, we're seeing more and more intense wildfires, and in places where they don't normally happen. That's why we've invested to train more community-based firefighters across the country.
I'd like to begin by providing a bit of a situational update. To date, there have been 2,214 wildfires nationally so far this year, and approximately 3.3 million hectares have been burned. And across the country, there are currently 413 wildfires burning, and 249 of those fires are deemed out of control. There are also 18 active wildfires specifically impacting First Nations, with 6 in Alberta, 5 in Saskatchewan, 1 in the Northwest Territories, 4 in Quebec, and 2 in Nova Scotia. And as of yesterday, an estimated 26,000 people remain evacuated from their homes across the country. I will acknowledge that the images that we have seen so far this season are some of the most severe ever witnessed in Canada. And the current forecast for the next few months indicates the potential for continued higher than normal fire activity.
In India, moving slowly on restored tracks, trains began passing Bahanga Bazari Railway Station, the station in control of and nearest to the site of India's deadliest train crash in over 2 decades. Railway employees at the small station suddenly under a global spotlight after the horrific crash that killed 275 people took place barely a kilometer from it, were working to repair broken tracks and resume normal rail operations. The rail disaster struck when a passenger hit a stationary freight train, jumped the tracks, and hit another passenger train passing in the opposite direction near the district of Balasore in the eastern state of Odisha. Following non-stop efforts to rescue survivors and clear and repair the track, trains resumed running over that section on the line. Meanwhile, officials say flooding from torrential rains in Haiti has left at least 42 people dead over the past couple of days and dozens more missing and injured. Over 13,600 homes are also listed as flooded. In the coastal town of Léogâne, located west of Port-au-Prince, in the still waterlogged streets, many were foraged for clothes washed away by the flood, hidden in the mud. At the St. Croix Hospital, locals helped wash away the water from waiting rooms and patios. Beds and other objects stood in flooded rooms, while others were laid out in the sun to dry. The Civil Protection Agency said the death toll had risen after floods over the weekend hit various parts of the country, including near the capital, Port-au-Prince. The deadly floods came as Haiti faces an already difficult scenario amid rampant gang violence, which the head of civil protection told the Miami Herald had impeded rescue efforts. Organized by the Railway Union of the Itinerant Commercial Review, Portuguese railway workers plan to walk out in a dispute over pay from June 5 to July 5, the latest in a series of strikes, again, actions by staff who are demanding better pay and improved working conditions. According to Portugal's state news agency, Lusa, a total of 22 trains were canceled on the first day of the strike. Located in downtown Lisbon, Rocio railway station is among those bearing the brunt of the disruptions. And a pier in the city of Kherson went underwater after the Nova Kafkova Dam, further up the Dnipro River, was breached. A local resident said the water level in one of the Dnipro River's tributaries in Kherson had risen by 1 meter. Ukraine accused Russia of blowing up the dam from the inside in a deliberate war crime. Russian installed officials gave conflicting accounts, some blaming Ukrainian shelling, others saying the dam had burst on its own. The Nova Kakhovka Dam supplies water to Ukraine's Crimean Peninsula and the Zaporizhzhia nuclear plant, both under Russian control. The destruction of the dam creates a new humanitarian disaster in the center of the war zone and transforms the front lines just as Ukraine is unleashing a long-awaited counteroffensive to drive Russian troops from its territory. And blasts were seen in Kyiv early this morning as Russia launched a new wave of overnight airstrikes on the city, with officials at the Ukrainian capital saying that air defense systems downed more than 20 cruise missiles on their approach. Witnesses reported hearing several blasts that sounded like air defense systems while the city was under air raid alerts for more than 4 hours, starting soon after midnight. Falling debris hit road services and damaged power lines to the trolley system in Kyiv's Desnyansky district. This district, which on the left bank of the Dnieper River, is Kyiv's most populous. No casualties have been reported. And U.S. Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin has stated that equipment and training provided to Ukraine was strictly to be used in defense of their sovereign territory. The Pentagon chief acknowledged that tracking how weapons and other military systems are being used was difficult, but expressed confidence in Ukraine. Austin also told media he would leave it for the Ukrainians to describe its military operations, as Russia said it had thwarted a major offensive in the Ukrainian region of Donetsk.
In terms of describing any potential Ukrainian operations, I would defer to the Ukrainian leadership to do that. I mean, I'm sure they'll at the right time talk about or explain exactly where they are in their preparation and their execution of any planned offensive. You asked the question about the defenses that the Ukrainians might encounter. It's been widely reported that Russia has constructed defenses, along the border of the occupied territory, and those defenses, in many cases, are defenses in depth. So we see several lines of fortifications, ditches, dragon's teeth, prepared positions, those kinds of things. Now, that's so in some cases it's a fairly significant preparation there. But I would say that they have to defend against a pretty significant, across a pretty significant area. So, they probably can't be strong, in every place. So it's incumbent upon the Ukrainians to find those points of advantage where they can leverage and exploit. So, we'll see what happens. Again, our goal was to make sure that we provided them with the training, the platforms, the capability to be able to successfully breach and maneuver. So, the use of our equipment for offensive operations in Russia, we certainly would discourage that. And in terms of our ability to track end-use monitoring, we continue to progress in terms of capability. The limitation has been, from the very beginning, the number of people we actually have on the ground there in Ukraine. Now, having said that, I think the Ukrainians have been, by and large, really transparent in allowing us to access those areas we need to access and look at what we need to look at. So we will certainly maintain the stance that the equipment that we provide is for use in their defense of their sovereign territory. And again, we'll continue to refine our in-use monitoring capabilities as well. But I think we have come a ways, but it will never be perfect until you can get a lot of people on the ground.
The United States and Denmark are working together to address Russian aggression in Ukraine. That's according to President Joe Biden, who was speaking during an Oval Office meeting with Danish Prime Minister Mette Frederiksen. Frederiksen's visit to the U.S. comes amid speculation that the White House will use the visit to vet her as the first female NATO Secretary General. According to diplomats, Frederiksen, 45, has emerged as a serious contender to replace Jens Stoltenberg, who is scheduled to step down as chief of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization in September. She stepped into the limelight on the international stage last year as a staunch supporter of Ukraine in its war with Russia, gaining respect for her efforts to strengthen Western unity in the face of conflict. The main obstacle for her potential candidacy is that Denmark has long been a laggard in defense spending and has come under pressure to bring military spending up to 2% of GDP, a key goal for NATO member states. But in December, Frederiksen and her new centrist government moved a plan to meet NATO's target forward by 3 years to 2030.
Denmark is one of our greatest allies and most reliable friends, closest friends, and on lockstep in every global issue that we've been engaged in. And together we're working to protect those values, including standing up for the people of Ukraine against the brutal aggression of the Russians. And we've also addressing global challenges from promoting inclusive economic growth, the climate crisis. And I want to thank you for your clean energy transition leadership. I really mean it.
I mean, from a European perspective, to have a president in the U.S. who is committed to the transatlantic alliance has always been extremely important. But I mean, nowadays, when war has returned to our continent in Europe, it is so important that our allies and our friends, that we stick together and that we are united. And we have truly been for now 15 months in Ukraine. We will, of course, continue from a Danish perspective our very strong support to Ukraine. But I'm looking forward to work even closer with you on defense and security.
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky met British Foreign Secretary James Cleverly in Kyiv on Monday and discussed preparations for a NATO summit and Ukraine's efforts to end Russia's invasion. In remarks at the meeting, Zelensky thanked Cleverly for Britain's continued support of Ukraine and discussed the supply of air defense systems following recent attacks by Russian missiles and drones. Cleverly's visit came as Russia reported that Ukraine has begun a counteroffensive, something Ukrainian Deputy Defense Minister Hanna Maliar dismissed.
Thank you so much, Mr. Foreign Secretary, Ambassador, your team. Thank you for coming. Not the first time. I think we know a lot about each other. And we are very thankful for all that big support, really big support, what UK gave and given, still giving, and we hope will prolong this support to Ukraine. And I want to thank for the last one. It's about opening possibility for training missions for our pilots on fighter jets, and also the possibility to open discussion about coalition of patriots. That's also very important. I'm happy that all the leaders understood that during this period of time when we have such big escalation by attacking of different kinds of rockets. And during all this period when we don't have fighter jets, we need really something to close the sky, and we understand the name of this something.
The traffic is heavier, which normally is a bad sign in a city, but I think for me it demonstrates what I've known to be true, and that is that the Ukrainian people are not going to allow themselves to be broken by this. And I think that you know, you're very much leading by example, but it's for me fascinating to watch the Ukrainian people, even though there are drone attacks, even though there are alarms going off through the night, even though, you know, Russia has tried throughout the winter to break the infrastructure of your country, to break the will of your people, the Ukrainian people keep refusing to be broken, yourself included. When we made the commitment publicly that we would continue backing you and your country until you are victorious in your self-defense, we meant it. When we said that we would do more and go further, we meant it.
The United States is prioritizing air defenses to be provided to Ukraine. That's according to the White House spokesperson, Admiral John Kirby. The United States and Germany provided Ukraine advanced Patriot missile batteries this year, and Ukraine had already received advanced shorter-range systems such as NASAMS and IRT from Western partners.
We've been prioritizing air defense now for many, many months, and in this last package, one I think we just talked about last week, there were additional interceptor missiles. So without getting ahead of announcements to come, I can assure you that air defense remains top on the list of the kinds of capabilities that we're going to continue to make sure Ukraine has.
Are Patriot batteries, I know that those are tough because they're fairly scarce, so is that a possibility?
They are. There's not a lot of them, either in our inventory or the inventory of nations that have purchased them. But again, I don't want to get ahead of where we are. We know air defense is a priority, and we know how well the Patriots have been performing inside Ukraine, which is, again, why we provided some additional interceptor missiles last week. All I can tell you is that we're going to prioritize it going forward. I just don't want to get ahead of announcements.
Ukraine has enough weapons to begin its counteroffensive against Russia, and the operation will give the country the victory it needs to join NATO. These are the words of Ukraine's Foreign Minister Dmytro Kuleba, who adds that membership of the military alliance would probably only be possible for Ukraine after the end of active hostilities. Ukraine has for months feted an upcoming assault to retake territories occupied by Russia using tanks, armored cars, and artillery donated by its Western allies. Kuleba did not say whether the counteroffensive had started when asked. He answered that the most important thing was not when it started, but that it had ended in Ukrainian victory. Kuleba says NATO membership is the next big target on Ukraine's agenda after some of its allies agreed to train Ukrainian pilots on the F-16 fighter jets coveted by Kyiv. And joining us for a discussion on a lot of items is Betty Dibia from South Africa. She's joining us from Johannesburg. Betty, thank you for being with us today.
Thank you, Susan. Good to see you.
Thank you so much. Now, I want to go back to the Canadian wildfires that we were discussing previously in the program. We understand that South Africa is helping with the firefighting effort. What other agencies are helping out?
For now, what we know it's the firefighters from an entity called Working on Fire. It's a Working on Fire program, which is part of the Department of Fisheries, Forestries, and the Environment, I think. And they've been part of these contingents that are usually sent out to countries. Most of the records that we have is to Canada to help out in fighting wildfires, because they have that capability in the country, especially given the fact that in places like the Western Cape, you often experience wildfires like that, and some other smaller places, they refer to that as veld fires. So you have 200 who have already gone on the 3rd of June with 15 managers, and then in a week's time, or in a week after the 3rd of June, that's about the 10th of June, you have another contingent of 213 managers going to join them to help out. The tour of duty is to be about 35 days in Canada.
Okay, and Betty, now wildfires in Canada are certainly a recurring decimal. Now, is this South Africa's first time in helping out, or is there a habitual relationship?
No, it's not the first time. It's probably about the 5th deployment. I'm not quite sure about the numbers, but they've done this several times. I know that the most famous one was in 2016 when the firefighters sent out their down tools in protest, saying that the Canadian firefighters were being paid more than them, and they had to return home. They didn't stay for the entire duty time that they were supposed to stay. But I think they've mended fences. And after that, that was in 2016. But after that, in 2019, I think they signed an MOU. That's the Canadian Interagency Forest Fire Center. They signed an MOU with South Africa in 2019 for the exchange of wildfires resources, helping out on both sides, being able to help out, because South Africa has records as well of wildfires that destroy quite a lot. We have one huge one in 2017 that they often refer to as the Knysna fire that destroyed over 16,000 hectares of land space, and some firefighters died, some volunteers died, and some homeowners died as well. We still have the recurring fire in areas like the Table Mountain in Cape Town. And these places I'm mentioning there in the Western Cape, which is more prone to wildfires. But it's a two-way thing, where, well, in the world today, there is a lot of cooperation. So I don't think it's out of place, but that's how it's been. There's an MOU in place between both countries to support one another or support each other in situations like this.
I'm curious to know what brought about this particular alliance between South Africa and Canada.
As I said, in the world today, you cooperate where you can and where you have capabilities. In South Africa, they do have the capabilities compared to most African countries. They do, and it's only good for you, because you will need that kind of support too in times of trouble or the dark days that you have. So it's a cooperation, and they have these cooperation projects on different issues, not just about firefighting. So this particular one is coming out to light because of the situation in Alberta, in Canada. But most countries have collaborations in several areas, and this is just one of them between South Africa and Canada.
And I'm not sure if you mentioned earlier where these fires are stemming from.
Well, I'm not in Canada. But the fire in Canada we are talking about is the wildfire in Alberta, in Canada. I'm in Johannesburg, remember? But they're going to Canada to help.
Yeah, and the fires have stemmed from Alberta and are moving across the country.
Yes, yes.
So one would have thought that with South Africa's issues that they're currently facing and being so far away from Canada, that it wouldn't really be an option to rely on. What are your thoughts with that? What is the response to emergencies like in South Africa right now? I know that they're facing their own challenges.
Every country has challenges. America is the United States of America deployed firefighters as well, just like Canada. But you know, America has that country has its own problems. So the fact that you have problems in other areas doesn't mean you can't help out where you can in other places. So that's the way the world goes. So cooperation, support, and America, with all its challenges, is usually among the first to step up to help with volunteers, with finance, with machines, with professionals to help countries that are in trouble. So you make more friends, and it's always good to help out where you can. And when you're in need as well, friends will help you out.
All right. Well, that was Debbie joining. Sorry.
No, and you asked a question about emergency services also. I didn't quite hear that in South Africa.
Oh, just how are they faring, the emergency services in South Africa, the response to emergencies like this?
They try. I always keep comparing to other African countries. South Africa is miles ahead, despite their challenges. They try. Of course, you have the issue of funding, the issue of crime, where some of the emergency service people are attacked, and even robbed. But they try, and they're miles ahead of many other African countries in terms of the equipment that they work with compared to many other African countries. But they still have their challenges in terms of funding, in terms of equipment. But I would say they try. They actually try compared to many African countries.
All right. Thank you so very much, Betty. Appreciate you joining us.
Thank you so much. All right, bye.
That was Betty Dibia, our Channels TV South African Bureau in Johannesburg. Now, we're going to take a quick break. When we return, Turkey's new cabinet held its first meeting. Welcome back. Prince Harry arrived at London's High Court, where he will give evidence in his lawsuit against the publisher of British tabloid The Daily Mirror, which he accuses of phone hacking and other unlawful acts. Harry, King Charles's younger son, failed to appear in court, but will enter the witness box, becoming the first senior British royal to give evidence in court in 130 years. He is one of more than 100 high-profile figures suing Mirror Group newspapers, the publisher of the Daily Mirror, Sunday Mirror, and Sunday People, for alleged wrongdoing between 1991 and 2011. Now, MGN, now owned by Reach, apologized at the start of the trial for one admitted occasion that the People had unlawfully sought information about Harry, accepting he was entitled to compensation. But it has rejected his other allegations, saying he had no evidence for his claims. And joining me here today, I'll be speaking with Teniola Sobowale, from our Channels TV correspondent. How are you doing today? And thanks. Welcome to the program.
Hi, Susan. It's good to see you.
Now, the gloves are off. Harry is on a mission to reform the press. Tell us about this trial. What is Prince Harry's case?
Susan, I think the gloves have been off for quite a while now. If you've been following Prince Harry ever since he got married to Meghan. So when it comes to Prince Harry and the press, we've seen this time and time again. But this time, though, the focus is on the publisher of newspapers, the Daily Mirror, Sunday Mirror, and the People. So Prince Harry has just left the High Court in central London a few minutes ago at about 5 p.m. But for hours today, since the morning, he has been given evidence about claims that journalists of the Daily Mirror group used phone hacking and other illegal means to write articles about him. In his witness statement released just as he was about to be cross-examined in court, he said that stories that he believes originated from hacking not only caused security concerns, but damaged his relationship with others, leaving him unable to trust other people, including his own brother, Prince William. I know we've been talking about the rift between the brothers, but this kind of showed that that rift has been there for quite a while, even before it was revealed last year. He also said these articles, which were published between 1996 and 2010, had him worried about being expelled from school. One was a claim about him using drugs. As well as this, there were also claims about hacking of voice messages, voicemails of not just his phone, but other family members like his own mother, Diana, before she died. Now, while the Daily Mirror has in the past actually admitted that phone hacking did take place with regards to Prince Harry and the royal family in general, its lawyers are arguing that it's not the case, that the prince is given evidence against. And also just to mention that this case isn't just the prince suing the Daily Mirror group. He's doing this alongside two other celebrities who also claim journalists have used unlawful means to write stories about them. So it's a huge test, depending the outcome. He'll be back in court tomorrow to give more evidence till midday, but the case will continue until Thursday, Susan.
This certainly isn't the first time for press to be taken to court for phone hacking and the like. I mean, does it surprise you that 10 to 20 years later, we are still dealing with the press and privacy issues? Shouldn't this have all been sorted with previous reforms?
Well, it's not really surprising, I guess, as Prince Harry's lawyer described in court yesterday. Details about the prince's life where, our stories too good not to publish. The royal family is big news. I mean, we saw during the coronation, millions, thousands of people came to the UK just to watch the coronation. So undoubtedly, stories about the prince, they just drive sales. So there's a rush to get those stories. Even apart from the episode I'm sure you're aware of last month, true or untrue, depending who you ask, which the prince claimed that there was a car chase involving his wife Meghan and her mother in New York. That docu-series in which the couple released last year shows the extent the press, is willing to get a story about the couple. We heard of them camping outside their home, paying money to Meghan's families just to get a comment, and also that big dispute with Meghan's father, which kind of started with the press paying him to say things about Meghan. It's an ongoing thing about the press, that press intrusion, as Prince Harry and Meghan have described it. It's ongoing because, let's be real, stories about the royal family sell very well and people want to read, or, royal fans want to read about those stories.
That's true. It's a good point. And in the past, Tenny, people have tried to extort money for this particular type of thing. And surely this isn't the motivation for Prince Harry. What is it for him?
It depends on who you ask. Rightly, well, some people have said that since the prince has stepped away as a working royal, he needs to make money some way. But I don't really believe that this is what, is happening here. He's spoken time and time again about the effect of what he calls press intrusion has on his mental health, and not only that, but seeing how it affected his mother. So I think, as he has said time and time again, he's taken a stand to ensure this kind of press intrusion stops. In his book, memoir, he spoke about this, saying he even wants to see people in jail because of this, and also to protect his family, especially seeing the way his wife, Meghan, has also been treated by the media, drawing similarities with the way his own mother was treated. But then, of course, you have those people who say, taking into account how much he was paid for the docu-series last year, I think millions of dollars for that, people are saying, this is all just a money-making kind of plan. But then you also have to think about what he has said time and time again, that he wants to take a stand against press intrusion and protect him and his family, and also change things for the future.
Tenny, now, if Prince Harry loses, what would happen there? And what would this do for his future? I mean, your thoughts about the media. And if he wins, will he look for further reform? And what kind of win will it really be if he has to open up his personal life, his personal relationships, his relationships with his brother, father, previous girlfriends? Would it be considered a win?
Depending on how this goes, I think it would be a huge test, that's for sure. If Prince Harry and the other claimants win, the two others, the judge would definitely use this to set the level of damages, which is the amount the publisher could pay in other cases like this from other celebrities. And in terms of the information about his personal life, these are nothing new. We have to remember that these are all based on articles that have been written in the past. So it's nothing new that we're hearing. These are stories that the press have covered. And I believe the focus, this involves about 33 articles that are being laid out in court this week. And if it doesn't go accordingly, it would certainly be quite disappointing for the prince, I guess, but definitely not the end of the road. In his case against the media, he and his wife, Meghan, have actually filed at least 7 lawsuits against British and US media organizations since 2019. I think 5 of them are still pending. So there's a lot more to look out for. So it's definitely not the end of the road in his fight for, better press coverage.
All right, Tenny, thanks very much for having a chat with us.
Thanks, Susan.
Clashes erupted in Nantes as protesters marched across the western French city to protest against government plans to raise the retirement age to 64 in what could be a final attempt to pressure lawmakers into scrapping a law that is already on the statute books. Riot police fired tear gas canisters after protesters threw projectiles at them. French President Emmanuel Macron's decision to force the reform through with special constitutional powers prompted angry protests this spring. But the issue has slowly moved down the media agenda, making it harder for unions to mobilize. Between 400,000 and 600,000 people are expected to turn out at protests across France, authorities say, which would be down from more than 1 million who took part in marches at the height of the pension protests earlier this year. The SNCF Railway Company said intercity trains are likely to be only slightly disrupted, while the metro network in Paris will run a normal service. However, 1/3 of flights out of Paris Orly airports have been canceled. Millions of people have been demonstrating and joining strikes since mid-January to show their opposition to the bill. Turkey's new cabinet held its first meeting under President Tayyip Erdogan in capital Ankara. Newly appointed ministers and other officials visited the mausoleum of Mustafa Kemal Atatürk, the founder of the modern Turkish Republic. Erdogan named his government's new cabinet, including the new heads of the economy and foreign ministers, after extending his two-decade rule in an election in May. Iran presented what officials described as its first domestically made hypersonic ballistic missile, in a development likely to heighten Western concerns about Tehran's missile capabilities. Named Fatah, the missile was unveiled at a ceremony attended by President Ibrahim Raisi and commanders of Iran's elite Revolutionary Guards Corps. The head of the Guards Aerospace Force, Amirali Hajizadeh, said in a speech at the ceremony that at a distance of 1,400 kilometers, we can accurately hit any target we want, and no anti-missile system can deal with it. Hypersonic missiles can fly at least 5 times faster than the speed of sound and on a complex trajectory, which makes them difficult to intercept. Last year, the Islamic Republic said it had built a hypersonic ballistic missile which can maneuver in and out of the atmosphere. Secretary General Antonio Guterres said the international community needs to take urgent steps under current arrangements to relieve the burden on developing and emerging economies, stressing that beyond emergency measures, we need a structural response. The policy brief on reform of the international finance architecture, Guterres said, sets out ambitious, concrete proposals in 6 areas to address historic injustices and systematic bias. The policy brief on a global digital compact, Guterres told the meeting, sets out ways to advance an open, free, secure, people-centered, equitable digital future at a time of growing anxiety about the impact of technology on our lives. On the policy brief on outer space released last week, he said, "Most of us will never travel to space. It can be hard to understand why we should care what is happening there, with so much poverty and hunger here on Earth. But dramatic advances in space means that what happens there has implications for us all."
Will never travel. Policy brief on moving beyond gross domestic product looks at measuring the things that really matter to people and their communities. GDP tells us the cost of everything and the value of nothing. Our world is not a gigantic corporation. Financial decisions should be based on more than a snapshot of profit and loss. And the policy brief on a global digital compact sets out ways to advance an open, free, secure, people-centered, equitable digital future at a time of growing anxiety about the impact of technology on our lives. All these briefs provide ideas on how we can revitalize the multilateral system, accelerate efforts to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals, and keep global temperature rise as close as possible to the 1.5-degree limit of the Paris Agreement. Most of us will never travel to space. It can be hard to understand why we should care what is happening there with so much poverty and hunger here on Earth. But dramatic advances in space mean that what happens there has implications for us all. Space assets already play a growing role in navigation, internet provision, and monitoring trends on Earth, from energy and climate to biodiversity and a host of other vital functions. Nearly 40% of SDG targets rely on data from space. The policy brief provides you with proposals on mitigating the risks and harnessing the opportunities of space in the most inclusive way possible. The international community needs to take urgent steps under current arrangements to relieve the burden on developing and emerging economies.
When we return, Burkina music. It's no ordinary concert. Details in a moment. Stay with us. And welcome back. The Democratic Republic of Congo's government is claiming 10 of its citizens died after their university campus was bombarded in airstrikes in Sudan's capital, Khartoum. In a statement, the Foreign Affairs Ministry wrote it had learned with deep dismay of the killing of its citizens at the International University of Africa. Foreign Affairs Minister Christophe Lutundula stated that there were indications the airstrikes were carried out by the regular army on an area occupied by civilian and unarmed populations. He added that the government was waiting for the Sudanese authorities to shed more light on the incident. Clashes between warring parties escalated in the capital Khartoum on Sunday following the expiration of a fragile ceasefire deal that had brought some respite from a weeks-long conflict. The fighting between the Sudanese armed forces and the rival Rapid Support Forces has persisted despite repeated truces. The latest agreement, which expired on Saturday evening, was signed in Jeddah, Saudi Arabia on May 20. Between representatives of the two sides for 7 days of humanitarian assistance. The deal entered into force at 9:45 p.m. Khartoum time on May 22nd and was then extended for an additional 5 days on May 30. Momin Al-Maki, a journalist based in Sudan, reports violent clashes between the two rival military factions on Sunday, with both sides using heavy weapons. Clashes also intensified in the western region of Darfur, where at least 40 civilians were killed. Governor Miniarko Manawi on Sunday declared Darfur a disaster zone, covering all its 5 states, and called for the international community to provide the region with emergency humanitarian aid. Shortages of food, medicines, and especially water are becoming extremely acute as clashes escalate in Sudan's greater capital. Fierce fighting between the Sudanese armed forces and the rival Rapid Support Forces has intensified and spread across the greater capital area of Sudan, compromising Khartoum, Omdurman, and Khartoum North, as well as in Darfur. The fighting has further exacerbated the already precarious humanitarian situation in the country. People in the greater capital area are trapped in a stressful situation, with power, gas, and communication being cut off, and food, water, and medicines running out. "12 years after South Sudan's independence, landmines are still a threat. According to the UN Mine Action Service, over 5,000 people have been killed or injured by unexploded ordnances and landmines since 2004. Eastern Equatorial's Magui County, near the border with Uganda, is one of the country's most heavily mined areas. According to Mine Action Review, who does global mine analysis, by the end of 2021, the state had the most areas contaminated with cluster munitions in the nation, 55 out of a total of 130. Eastern Equatoria County was also impacted by wars with Sudan and fighting with Ugandan rebel group LRA. Kenyan police fired tear gas at hundreds of people protesting in Nairobi. The demonstration was against a proposed finance bill that would hike taxes on fuel and housing. President William Ruto is under pressure to raise revenues in the face of rising government debts, but his proposals have been criticized by civil servants and political opponents who say the cost of living is already too high. Around 500 protesters marched to Parliament to present a petition against the bill. 11 protesters were seen being detained by police. Ruto has defended the bill, saying its provisions are needed to ensure financial security. It will create jobs for young people, he claims, by building new homes financed through the housing levy. concert that Hughes Guba puts on in his native Burkina Faso. The rapper uses his gift to entertain the crowd, but uses the proceeds for development in the crisis-worn country. The crowds love the music, which Guba is using to fund what he sees as a very important aspect of community life: education.
Under the multicolored strobe lights of Ouagadougou's largest sports arena, a crane lowers Burkinabe rapper Hughes Guba towards a sea of clamoring college students eager to hear some of their favorite songs in exchange for the cost of a ticket. The money will be destined for greater places than Guba's pockets. However, banners throughout the arena read, "One concert, one school," signaling to the audience that a portion of every purchase will go to building a school in a village without one.
That's why we came out, to support this young man and to show that in Africa too, there are young people who think about these kinds of projects. And he's an example to follow.
Burkina Faso's struggle to contain an Islamist insurgency has faltered in recent months, creating one of the world's fastest growing populations of internally displaced people. The fighting has also left education access in Burkina Faso critically impaired, with over 1 million children affected by school closures and 6,134 academic institutions shut as of February. According to the Norwegian Refugee Council, that marks an increase of over 40% since the end of the previous school year. Guba, who goes by the stage name Hugo Boss, hopes that by holding concerts with a specific aim of fundraising for schools in such areas, he can prove that locals are capable of closing that gap without leaning on international aid. His first school, fully funded through concert sales, is nearing completion, and he aims to complete more by the end of the year. If successful, he hopes to expand the one concert, one school model to include clinics and nurseries.
And that's it for The World Today. I'm Susan Illian. See you tomorrow.